Oh, that's so nice. This is, Sharon Martin sent me this bottle, and I asked her to. This is called Elixir of Youth. Contents: rainwater, colloidal silver, essential oils, and crystals. Go to SharonMartin.com. It's 2 R's in Sharon, SharonMartin.com. And I think you can go to her website and she'll tell you all about it. I must say though, I don't know what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting this. This is really, I didn't expect it to be bad or anything. But it has, first of all, the smell is nice. It's really mild, which I appreciate because I'm really sensitive to smells altogether. But this is really interesting because it leaves your hand. I don't know if you can see it. It leaves your hand. There's a particular feeling that it stuck out at me when I first sprayed it. It has a feeling. It's not slimy. It's not dry. It's just really, really smooth. Smells really good, but not particularly strong. And what it does is, we talked about it. It's a recipe that was, I should let her do. She said she's going to send me a blurb, and when we get the blurb, I'll put it up on. Yeah, that's another good one. Ormus Goldwater. Yeah, we're gonna I'll put it on my wall when she sends me a blurb about it. But it turns your cells into a toroidal field, so it's all about getting regeneration energies and into your field. It's really fantastic. So Elixir of Youth. I don't think I was surprised too. Well, she sent it to me for free, but when she told me I was surprised that it was particularly affordable. It's not one of those really, really those things that like you wish you could buy, but most of us are broke on this journey at the time. Cancel. All right. So we'll start this thing off. So I have neither Carmen nor Kenji with me at the moment. Carmen has run off and Kenji's asleep. So I decided that just for today, I was going to leave him because I know he's sleeping. So that's that. He's wrapped in his blanket and he will join me when he can. And Carmen, I'm sure I'm going to find her at some point. I did look around for her, but she's too difficult to locate at the moment. So I thought I would go on and I've got all of this material to cover. I still haven't talked about, I know one of the things I'm supposed to talk about more is the group dynamic that was in the energetic construct that we came down with in the Joan template. And even though the Joan template per se is defunct and it's canceled, they cancel them sometimes. I'm going to wind up, it's kind of like it's retired. Like you can't use that formula anymore. You can take, it's because it's been adopted enough. It has done its job. So now it's being retired. But the format is the group dynamic format, that the group template. There's a way that functions, and that's not going anywhere. That's actually the thing that we're here to update and regenerate and start over again from a place of health. So first we took it into a group dynamic that was designed to, it divided, and then we had to put it back. So the putting it back, there was a purging process too. That's kind of still taking place. It depends. In certain strata, it's done already, and in certain strata, it's barely started. So depending on where you are located, hang on. Depending on where you're located, the problem with this diagram of the toroidal field, It's fine as insofar as like a personal toroidal field, but you kind of have to imagine when we're talking about group dynamics, like I can work in a toroidal field that is the size of the globe, or it can affect, like out here is where mass consciousness is. So depending on what you're working to address, the toroidal field is going to, the toroidal field that you're working within is going to be close to you, like this one is. You could make it smaller if you wanted, or it can extend far out to include an entire country or the globe if you wanted to. But I was going to talk about the process of manifesting, because we have to change the way we talk about manifesting, because even in the Abraham Hicks model, which most of you, if you're listening to this, you're already familiar with that. You know how it was for a while. Like 10 years ago, the idea, it wasn't even an idea, it was the way it was. You could focus on something for 17 seconds, and in 17 seconds is when, I'll bring this back out in a second. In 17 seconds, your photons will begin to come together. If you have the idea, the 17 seconds comes from 17 seconds of holding a particular idea. It has sped up dramatically, because in the fifth dimension, it's nowhere near 17 seconds. It does not take you 68 seconds to manifest something in the fifth dimension. Or it will be more like a form. When you're purely in 5, you can feel strongly into hold an idea in your mind, imagine it, and it's simply right there. And you could easily have that in 68 seconds. But again, it's like 17 seconds, another 17 seconds is when the particles come together and they begin to make, they come together. Another 17 seconds of focused, emotive thought, feel it real. You begin to have matter. So that's true. That is still true. But when we're moving up, we're moving into, that was a very kind of a masculine framework, which was appropriate because it was linear, right? Where when you're in the third dimension, everything you do is linear. So that's why the process of manifesting was linear, and it was, you focused on one thing, and it was one thing for 3 times. Again, it's the 3 to 1. Every time you see the numbers 3 and 1 together, you're in the process of creating a change. A 3 is the catalyst for change, and 1 indicates the direction, the thing, the idea, the thought, the impetus. That's the leader, the individual. So pay attention anytime you see a 3 and 1 together. The direction it's headed is wherever the 1 is. So that's why when, just to go back to this for a second, in the energetic construct, both for the Joan of Arc lifetime and also any energetic construct, the template for group operations, this is also the way group karma works. Group karma works. It's not only individuals that have karma, it's groups too. So if one group, so that's why, like I was going to talk about this later, the whole savior model versus the masses, where you've got one person saving the masses, but one person is doing the bulk of the labor. We had to change that. I'm going to wind up talking about this later. I want to get back to the manifesting. But by the time it goes around with groups, if you fail to rebalance it, like it didn't have to be a savior model. If everybody's kind of followed Jesus at the time and took their own power and actually did what he did and stepped into their own power fully, if that had gained more momentum the way it was actually supposed to be without being bastardized, we wouldn't have the corporate system that we have today, where it's now one, it's like the masses they're very depersonalized, but everyone gave their power away. So consequently, if you look at the geometry shifted, and now you've got these great big untouchable things, and the people have relatively little power compared to that. But that's also because everyone gave consent that something else above me is going to have the power. They did it at the time of Jesus. They did it with Joan of Arc. I guess I'm talking about this now. One of the things I do remember strongly, a strong memory, is not of the fire, because I think I was pulled out of my body. Oddly enough, the fire itself is like the one thing that I don't have a memory of that. I remember everything else in the whole lifetime. I know that there was a tremendous amount of angelic assistance, and I think they pulled me out. And but I do remember focusing. It's also possible that I simply left my body. That would be very in character with me. But the thing that I do remember is there were people who were horrified. I remember thinking, not one of you, I'm thinking like I was horrified too, that it seemed like it was all in vain, because not one of you is going to say, no, you can't take her. No, you can't have her. This is wrong. Nobody stood up and said, no, you can't do it. I'm not going to let you do that at whatever the cost for me. No, say no. If you see an injustice, stand up and say no. I remember that very clearly, that nobody stood. Nobody stopped it. Even if, I remember, it's funny because I'm going to get back to manifesting in a second. And I remember being a little girl in this lifetime and hearing the story about Jesus, that he was nailed to a cross and everybody was standing around weeping. And I remember hearing that, and it affected me. Like, I didn't know anything about my past life at that time, but I remember really hearing that story, and it upset me a lot. And I remember really thinking about that. I spent a lot of time alone as a child too. But I remember really thinking about that, and I didn't know why. Never even really questioned, like, why would this affect you so badly? Because there were a lot of parallels. But I remember thinking, if everybody was upset, why didn't they stop it? Why didn't they just say, no, you can't have him? Why wasn't there a mob to prevent this person from being nailed alive? Why didn't someone stand up and say no? I can't imagine doing that, allowing something like that to occur. But I guess also that's why I'm me, because I have learned since then that things matter a lot more to me than they seem to matter to a lot of people. I've been realizing just recently, kind of reviewing, sometimes you think back to things in your life and realizing how differently I would respond than other people in the same situation. And these are tested things, like not something like, oh, if I were there, I would have done X, Y, Z, but actually, like, I've done things that I can't even imagine, nor do I really want to imagine not acting properly, not standing up for someone when you see that they're in a position where they can't help themselves, or they're doing something. I can't imagine allowing an injustice or someone. I just can't imagine not taking action. But there are a lot of people that I genuinely love who took action, who neglected to do something that I consider to be very basic. And it was occurring to me the other day that I was a savior for a reason, because it just mattered to me a lot more than it matters to other people. I'm not saying on you. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying there are sometimes we can't necessarily take it for granted that of course things matter to other people the way they matter to us. It matters to me. And it actually kind of increased my own value in my own eyes, because I realized that I stood up and did that. Like I know that that's a reality. And it wasn't that I sucked, because I was really thinking about this last night, because I was down on myself for a really long time. Like, you made a mistake, it didn't work. You took a chance, you're an idiot. It didn't work, and now look, you've gotten yourself into this mess. But like right now, I'm still dealing with the karmic fallout of standing up for someone 600 years ago, or standing up for a country, or trying to do something that, yes, it was extremely ambitious, but it was also noble. And I'm glad that we're doing it again. I came back to finish the job. And if I have to leave my entire first team of people behind, I'll do that. Regrettably, because I thought that at least some of them would come too. And it turns out that they're not. So, all right. That was too bad. But I'll go alone, and there are plenty of people that will come with me this time who believe and care as much as I do. All right. So this, the group dynamic. Oh, should I talk about manifesting first? Yeah. The way the first of all there's I gotta say, so yeah, so manifesting badass. I'm not saying she's outdated at all. Abraham Hicks, I love Esther Hicks. Huge fan. And her material updates. She does update it. So the interesting thing, I guess I'm going to go into manifesting because it's more fun. So the third dimensional idea of that is very linear, right? Where you focus on a single thing, and it's funny because it's usually an object, but it doesn't have to be an object. It can be a circumstance, can be something. Can be social justice if you do that. But it's an interesting thing that it's changing from being linear and singular. It's changing from a masculine dominated thing. This is going to be a chapter, at least, if not its own book, it'll be a chapter in the book. We're now moving into it. The whole fifth dimension is female led. That doesn't mean that women are leading it, but it's female led. So the geometry is shifting to be round. So it's a toroidal field, and our understanding of the principles of manifesting need to be similarly adjusted. The thing about the toroidal field is that we've got it's manifesting in 5. We've already been through 4, right? Where it's sorry, this port is itching me. Oh, that cutlery. I didn't move it. I hate that cutlery. I'm going to move it. I can't stand it. Don't want my videos to have anything sharp in it. When you go... When you go to bring something to you, you're going to use your mental and emotional, imaginative faculties. You're going to get yourself completely centered. So you're going to wind up bringing it down. We're having a thunderstorm. If I lose you, I'll be back. You're going to bring it down the center of your body. The center of your body it's like you're standing in the toroidal field, and in the center of your body is a great big column of light, and you're going to manifest everything in the fifth dimension through your heart chakra. The thing that gives it, that really births it into the reality, into the substance, is the amount of genuine love that you put into it, right? You can have something abstract, even if you imagine something for 17 seconds. It was possible in the third dimension to create something in kind of an abstract form. You could get it to come toward you, but it's not going to be viable long term. This includes the third dimensional structures, this third dimensional institutions, third dimensional everything. The reason it's not viable, number one, it's self-oriented, it's self-focused, a lot of it. Everything that is self-focused turns inward, and it's not viable because it serves the self and it's not necessarily loving. That doesn't mean we're negating self-care, because everything has to start from a position of self-love. But your heart center has got to be fully activated, fully free-flowing. That's what the learning the self-love is about. You have to be really established and whole and well in your own personal emotional body before you can use it to create from a place of free-flowing love the way it's supposed to go, where it's not based in lack or limitation, where it's based in love and care for yourself and others, where you love the system and you love the thing that you're making. So in the third dimension, you could simply want something, and that's where you learn you could bring it to you with 17 seconds or 68 seconds of focused thought. And then there's a process of, and we're still in this terrain where we're, the strata where we're changing right now from a third dimensional system to a fifth dimensional system via fourth density. So right now it's important to understand the way both of these systems work, because there's we're still enough on the timeline where this system, the toroidal field manifestation system that's feminine based, it's like mother-child based, as opposed to the more masculine type manifesting, where you kind of go out and get something. It's driven and linear. The feminine version is based in love, where everything gravitates to you, you respond to it with love, and then it comes out into a form. So what it's doing is, this is the mental space where we talked about, like in the fourth dimension, where I said that everything is semi-solid. And when I'm looking, like when I or anybody else, if we are scanning your energy field, we can look in your body, we can see, it's a poor diagram to explain this, but like if I was looking into somebody's body, I could see where the dark parts are. She's all dark, but all right. And it looks like an X-ray. And if there are kind of dense, darker places, that's usually someplace where there's density and darkness. So it's going to be kind of more of an illness spot or a susceptibility. That's it. And if darkness, that tells you where there's an avenue or a vulnerability. So as a light worker or as a healer, I would be able to look at that and say, well, we're going to add light to that so that doesn't become a solidified ailment. But in their field around them, medical or otherwise, there's going to be stuff that it's energy that kind of takes on a semi-solid form, could look like a ghost or a spirit, or, like orbs are semi-solid. And there's just stuff that it isn't necessarily firmly into the third physical form yet, but It's on its way, and if but it's still fairly flexible. It's flexible enough so that, like, if you know that if you can see cancer or some kind of negative thought form, it's a negative thought form, it's beginning to take a form, and if you can address that while before it hits the body, because you know it's coming in. It's coming in, and if it's not stopped, if all of the signals go unaddressed and you miss all the red flags, or you choose to ignore them, it has the last resort is that it's going to show up as a big ailment or a small ailment. And if you choose to ignore that, it's going to eventually solidify into something that's fatal or you can't get rid of, whatever. And that's because a lot of things, not everything if it's karmic, but there are a lot of things that are just the product of sloppy vibrational hygiene that you could very easily address if it was floating around out here. We're having a thunderstorm. I have to go put this dog just away. Just a minute. Come here, come here, come here. Sorry. Come here, buddy. So one of the things that happens, here's my, here it is. So one of the things that happens, if you're this person and you want to focus on something that you want to bring to you in physicality, you would start by doing your 17 seconds, because it's not like we're not doing the visualization or the mental targeting anymore or feeling it real. It's not that we're leaving that masculine focus principle behind. It's just that we're combining it with this one too. So what happens when you focus on something and you feel into it, the place where that energy is going to start to come together in matter is going to be up here someplace. It's going to be like, yeah, it's going to be roughly around there. And if you're aware of it, so this thing is constantly turning, right? And you've got many of them again. So the reason some things take longer, like something personal is going to be, it's going to be not that long to, if your toroidal field that you're working with is only this big, it's not going to take that long to get back around to you. Something like social change, like that has a great big cycle, that has a lot of people's, a lot of people's individual toroidal fields, a lot of adjustments that have to happen. Those things take longer to manifest, but there's also still a predictable way to follow it. At any rate, so your reactions from the third dimension, if you're still in the third dimension, your reactions, the way you feel towards something when it gets to you, is going to have a strong effect on the way things are birthed. What you have to remember is that this thing keeps turning, and when it comes through you, if you have a reaction to something, let's say you want to work towards something, or you're changing a bad habit. Let's say you're changing a bad habit, and it's like you always attract the same kind of circumstance, and you really wish you could do something different, and you don't want this thing anymore, but you still have it, but you're kind of perpetually annoyed at it. This is the vibration that you're continually sending out, and it's going to go down. It's like when we birth a baby or when we create anything, it goes down, not up. I mean, it does, eventually comes back in. It's like when babies come into incarnation, they still are going to come down from spirit. So if you're having a response to something, and let's say that your new creation, you want to make a change, you want to bring a change into your life, and your new creation is it's in your imagination, and therefore it's floating around up here, but it hasn't really hit your field yet. It's kind of like you're still living in the old circumstances, but you're dreaming of something different. And some of us, like me, do this on a really, really big scale. It does work, but it takes longer. But what I'm after is bigger. Like if it was just me, like I'm a spiritual mega athlete. I've said this before, but it's true. If it was just me, or if I was doing it for just a small group of people, I could have us there already. But what I came in after this time is global change, a global flip, global equality. I want equality for women. I'm just after a bigger change. So it's taking longer, but that doesn't mean we're not getting it. We're getting it. So the first thing you do when, let's say the imaginative space, the astral realm is up here. The first thing that's going to actually meet your experience is going to be a version of the last thing that was previously created, because this thing hasn't come into a form yet. It hasn't made one rotation. It's really going to be solid when it makes 3 rotations and you respond to it the same way. So let's say I'm this person and I want to make a change, and let's say, for example, I quit smoking or I quit drinking. Like this person's a drinker and they want to quit drinking or they want to quit smoking. So they decide that they're going to make a change, and they're focused really strongly on having no more cravings or just being completely free of it. The first manifestation, that's probably a bad example. That's a bad example. Let me change tactics. Let's say this is a woman and she's attracting like the wrong type of partner or something like that. The first manifestation, first time around, I'm not explaining this well. Let's say she decides she's going to make a change. The first manifestation that comes back into her experience is going to be the physical representative of the last thing, her previous pattern. That's the way I wanted to put it. The previous pattern is going to come back around at least one more time. And the reason, so you can expect that. Like here's one real trap that people get stuck in, is that they think, well, manifestation doesn't work because I did the 17 seconds and I have been working on this and it must not work. So if your belief system is stuck in, I'll believe it when I see it. If you don't really fully understand the way it actually works, that you have to maintain your faith. It's going to ask you to maintain your faith for a certain degree, a certain amount, in order to change the pattern. 3 times, if you can get through kind of a 3 times a charm. If you can get through a 3 rounds of responding a new way to something that's an old pattern. It's actually, you can do it once, but the first manifestation is almost always, in the 3rd dimension, it's almost always a repeat of the previous thing, because this was already birthed into the field. You know, it came down, it was already coming together in your field that's absolutely going to hit you. It's like by the time it gets like roughly here in your field, it's on its way in. There's nothing you can do about it. Your choice at that point, by the time it gets semi-solid, your choice is to handle it appropriately. The best place you can change your thoughts, if you can get to something when it's like out here in your field, if there's cancer or something out here in your field, and it's something that you don't want, but you see it on its way in, you can say, oh, incoming, I'm going to quick do something to adjust it, because out there, before it becomes semi-solid, it's still very easy to adjust it with your thinking, with your whatever, with your focus, with energy healing. That's what energy healing's for. Just get to it before it solidifies. By the time it closes in on you, It's already on its way in, and all you can do is address it. You know, that's when you could like go get your early cancer screening, or like, yeah, all right, I'm going to deal with this now. Or however you would screen it, however you would treat it. But you would take care of the physical body if it's already become a physical problem. But you could know that, take responsibility for the thing that's coming into your field. The next time around, the new thing is, so the place where somebody's going to get tripped up usually is to say, like, let's say it's a woman who attracts the same type of person, and then she's like, oh, this thing happened to me again. They betrayed me again. They took advantage of me again. If you have the same kind of reaction and you make no adjustment to the energy body, or if you double down and say, this always happens to me, this is the only kind of person I ever get, you see, manifesting doesn't work. And then you take it out of faith. You focus more on the thing that has already been created. It was too late to change it. You respond poorly to the physical circumstance. You focus on the physical circumstance instead of having faith in something new. Then you haven't changed the energy enough, so that you're just going to wind up getting repeat circumstances. You know, you had a chance to focus on the ideal, but you didn't believe it enough. So what you need to do, I'm saying this to myself too, you do have to change yourself enough so that you're in vibrational alignment to something, to the new pattern instead of the old. And then when you're tested with a version of the old thing, don't have the previous reaction. You know, don't go into devaluing yourself, for example, or saying, I can never make it work. Forget it. You can make it work. You just have to get out of the previous pattern and wait for the, I mean, there are some cycles, particularly in group dynamics. I'm hearing this message really strongly for myself too, because I've been trying to get out of a particular group dynamic, which was the Joan construct, where it was all victimization. And because other people didn't step up to the plate in that group dynamic, once again, instead of it balancing, I was in a group dynamic. It's somewhat different because nobody is, you can't get out of it. You can't necessarily go back into isolation. So I can't go up and down at the same time. If I go up into a group dynamic, then I'm in a group dynamic. And if I went down, it would take me into a singular dynamic, but then I'd be in a singular dynamic where I could get out, but I wouldn't be doing my job. So it's something that I've had to take in two directions simultaneously, but I wasn't getting a heck of a lot of help. So that doesn't mean that it's not going to shift, however, because it has to. We're not in charge of where the planet is, or the fact that it's going through ascension. It's going through ascension. The only thing you can do right now is learn the way the new system works so that you can function in it. So when the first manifestation comes to you after you've done all this work to change your pattern, don't be surprised if it's a reiteration of the previous. But stay with the faith. If you can stay with the faith and continue to put more of your thought, energy, and emotional intensity toward 5, because remember, you're trying to focus your energy to where you want it to grow. So if you're focusing down into a singular dynamic, then it's going to get tighter and tighter because of the geometry. If you put more and more and more into the point of a triangle, it's going to get denser and denser. You've got to point up and put more of your faith and belief and emotional intensity there, and that's going to solidify, and it's going to come down into your field. And that's why you've got the third dimension and the fifth dimension merging, it's going to be we're not going to be in fourth dimension, we're in fourth density physical form. It's still physical form, it's just a lighter, freer version. And everything in the fourth density, fifth dimensional, fourth density world is lighter, freer. The social structures are more open. There's more freedom altogether. There's equality. There's much, much, much more flow, lot more light, lot more information, lot more data. But there is a group construct. And in order to get there, number one, you should understand it. But in order to get there, you have to pass through the 11 gateway. So the 11 gateway is something that when you're dealing with group dynamics, this was true of the Joan construct as well, but in the Joan construct, it went backwards and it went into inequality instead. And that's how we have like the savior model was one of inequality, where you've got one person holding all of that power, taking all of the power from other people, not always malevolent, sometimes it's quite the opposite of malevolent. But you've got like anytime you have one figure or one centralized power holder, be it a corporation or be it like the cabal or a savior figure or any kind of icon who has a lot of power, but it's like one point at the top, and then you've got this massive base, the lower triangle. That entire thing is going to go around in a circle. So imagine if every one of these groups, every one of the colored triangles represents a different group. And in fact, it was actually more multi-tiered than that, because this is a two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional model. So it's really a Merkaba. And the groups are harder to define. I'm not going to go into exactly which. It's not singular. It's why it becomes a difficult thing to discuss. Like for example, in the Joan construct, one of the triangles that I was in, one of the pairs, was with my previous business partner, Sarah, and it was more like we were dealing with balancing a particular energy stream, which had to do with which contained within it certain elements that were pervasive in her bloodline and my bloodline, and elements in society that kept happening. So we were trying to clear up a particular energy stream, but it's not something you can easily identify with like one name. But for example, in that there was very chronic, long-term autoimmune, a lot of illness. There was also parent-child separation. There was also problems with the legal system having to do with women getting money to take care of their children. There were things like that. There were more like issues, like a bouquet of issues that all needed to be redressed. So to answer the question, I can't remember who was it that asked me. You pointed it out. I misspoke. It's not exactly a 3-to-1 ratio mathematically. I meant numerologically, a 3 and a 1. I'm using that to represent the balance. So the way it was like every issue on the point of every triangle in the Merkaba were two beings. And it was our job to take the energy, take one particular issue, and it goes into, first of all, we add it. Like we both carry it in equal measure, and we add it to, or not in such equal measure. It was unequal, but there were two beings, and the first thing we do when we construct it, you see that, is we added it into the pot. So one of the things that we had, I should put a whoops. It's soup on the inside. Can you see that? No, you can't. It says soup. Everybody takes whatever they have, their own point of view, their own ancestry, and they add it to like the collective, the middle of the Merkaba, which is going to be shared by everybody. So the way that works is that any one of these people, this is also the group dynamic they're going forward to, but rather, so when on the other side, like when we get to 5, as a group, because it's not a location, we're still going to be on Earth, right? But it's going to be higher vibrational Earth. But when we get there, the way it's going to work is that all of the density is purged. So what you have instead is everyone is just sharing attributes that are positive, their best qualities of themselves, their gifts are being shared, as opposed to all of their fucked up lineage. Because what happened in the previous one is that everybody adds themselves, light and dark aspects of themselves, to the collective. So that worked for the time that we were in the Joan construct, because what we were trying to do at that time was heighten empathy. So there is a sequence, there's a rotational sequence, and everybody has to, and it works for group karma too. So this is why, like, if you didn't take your power back, if you fail to balance it when it gets to you, number one, you're going to stay there till it's balanced. Everyone's going to stay there until they balance their crap. So it's not like you can avoid it. You can delay it for, if you're stupid, you could delay it. You could postpone it or procrastinate dealing with it. Is it going to work? No. That's a really good way to get a tower moment. But it's going to wind up moving place by place by place, any given issue. Like, let's say somebody has parent-child separation or suicide issues in their lineage, and it's not addressed or not cleaned up. People, they know they've got this issue, but they're just not going to look at it, they're going to ignore the depression, and it just winds up accumulating in the lineage further and further and becoming more and more extreme. What was supposed to happen was that, like, let's say there's a 3 and a 1 at the top of each one. We started it because I said 3 and 1 is going to be a catalyst for movement always. The 3 is a catalyst for change. The 1 is going to determine the direction of the movement, because if you look at it, if you place like dots like this, and we're talking about flow, and we're talking about putting the mountain in the valley like nature abhors a vacuum, the energy is going to go in this direction. You'd have to work harder although you could do it that way too. Do you remember when I said that there's the 1111 gateway on a clock? Like service to self, you're going to be allowed to go only so far before you reach a tower moment where it cannot go any farther, and then it's going to come back around. And then again, with the depletion, if you're service to others, you can only do that so far until it reaches a given point, and then you're depleted and you can't serve anymore when you're depleted. So both of those things are going to basically make a 1. Like, if this dot, if there's a 3 to 1 ratio, and if it goes off in that direction, which it's not supposed to, what's supposed to happen to lock it into form is that the 3 side is going to put their extra to the side that doesn't have anything, and it's going to lock down into a 4 dynamic, like on a die. And that with 4 is going to give you structure. It's going to be like a square it's like a block that you can build with. But so usually whichever side has the 1 is going to determine the direction, because nature abhors a vacuum. So if there's space there, it's a good way to build a form. You can take it the other direction, but it's going to be harder to do. It's going to require more energy. But can you take it to that way? Yeah, but you're going to hit a tower moment, because that's going to give you a 0 and a 1. It's basically going to give you 4 that's upright, and then the structure is all, you have a vacuum on one side, but you've got 1 that the 4 is going to be in a straight line. That's basically where you reach. It's like, that's enough. This is as far as this person can can go without going backwards. Oh, it's a poor way to explain it. But what we're after, so we started on it with a 3-to-1 ratio in terms of how much of the energy we were carrying with 2 beings on either side, on every point. And then every single color represents a different perspective, a different issue, loosely based on groups in society. Like I know that the things that needed to be rebalanced, like for example, Sarah was carrying like landed gentry or family money or people who were born into power, born with a lot of privilege. And then I was kind of the other side where we're constantly peddling and constantly working, but no matter what we do, we can't get ahead. That population, like how much advantage did this person actually have? They grew up in the foster care system or whatever. We're trying to balance that out. So it's kind of one of those things, but it's a cluster of issues on every single point, because what we did in the Joan of Arc construct is come down with a team of people with a very between us, a very comprehensive idea about the comprehensive understanding about the issues in the world that needed to be changed in order for survival to get as many of the people up as possible through the 11 gateway. So what the idea was, this is the old construct, the way it worked, is that you add all of your stuff, everything that you're bringing in with you, and you add it to the collective space in the middle from which anybody can draw. So remember I was talking about group telepathy? Like, let's say, to use my previous example, I don't know why I always go back to this example, but I do. Like if Patrick Stewart was, there's a reason for that. I'm sure there is. I'm going to look at it. And plus he's all space and he's from, so Star Trek, and he's French. There's the Jean connection, Jean-Luc Picard. Anyway, I'm sure that that's not a random example. They're showing me that for some reason. And then that's about to be another series. It hasn't come out yet. I'm sure that there's some reason that they're showing me that, holding that up as an example. When I figure it out, I'll let you know. But let's say he's a member of this group and he puts everything he is, because there's no like doing it by halves. You basically go, it's full transparency. They have, even if you don't know what they have, because you don't have to understand it intellectually, but there are certain assets that they come in with that you can partake of when the construct is running properly. So if somebody has knowledge about the financial system, you're able to draw from that. You have that at your disposal, unless it's broken and it's not working correctly, in which case you don't. If somebody says, why should I help you? And I'm going to walk away with my bundle of energy, you can do that, but then you're going to be cut off too, which is stupid. Because if you do that, so this is one of the things that I'm not entirely sure where we are in the sequence, but I know that this is the way karma works too, because if you are in a group, like remember I said I didn't get Anna Divine School. I was supposed to get that this time. It was supposed to make a correction to establish my way forward. I'm not saying this out of resentment and bitterness, although there was definitely that. But this person not understanding, I'm not even sure who did it. Someone made sure that they were so uncooperative that I did not get the information, the help I needed to get that, which was supposed to redress all of the karma from the Joan of Arc lifetime, which that person had too. So they screwed themselves more than anybody else. I mean, they screwed me too, badly, very badly. Damaged me, it's way worse. However, whatever you do to this person, because you don't understand group dynamics, if you don't go along and don't expand and don't learn, if you stay linear, it doesn't mean it's not going to affect you, because there's a group dynamic that you were in regardless. It's going to go from this person. If you cut this thing off, the next person who's going to experience it is going to be them. And if they don't balance it either, it's going to be harder for them to do too, because it's going to be easy. Something is easiest to correct before it really hits. Like there's a time when you can make a correction. The further along you go, the farther and farther the bandwidth goes. So for example, this person is going to have a hard time, the hardest time reaching the person polar opposite. It's also going to have a hard time reaching this person. The only way to reach this person is through this person. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but if any one of these people refuses to cooperate or just insists that they're not part of a group and I'm just not going to do it, you're going to wind up handicapping yourself because the thing is still rotating. And sooner or later, the one who's going to be isolated is you. And it's going to be way worse at that point with like no way to recover. You're not going to be able to catch the person that you screwed to begin with. And I'm not even entirely sure who I'm talking to now. I know it was somebody, but it was a sequence. And since it went out of balance with intent, which makes it worse, frankly, ignorance is bad enough, but intent is worse. And we can't do anything about it. We can keep it going for as long as we can keep it going on fumes. But eventually, you screwed yourself. And I'm not going back into a savior model. And plus, at this point, I've got nothing else to do. I'm delivering. I'm still doing my job, and I've double-checked. I've double-checked my integrity all the way along. Like, what could I do differently? And some things I could have played it better, but my integrity's spot on. And so I'm trusting that in the process at this point. At any rate, it's interesting. I should mention at this point, if you've been watching Legion, they just had the end of Legion, which is about that exactly. It's basically the story of the construct, and they dismantled time. I was shocked when my guides told me to watch that. But I did watch it, and I recognized it as being a product of our energy stream. So everything that happened in that show, and it just ended last week. Last week was the final episode, season 3, and it was the last episode. And the last episode was called "The End of the End." And you see timelines collapsing. So the interesting thing about timelines collapsing is that there was a while that we could reroute things. Remember I said like stuff, we were making stuff on the Council of Balance and adjusting timelines. And as it's gone down, I'm going back to this diagram, but it's really way, 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 way bigger. Let's say that she's the Earth. And as we make adjustments up here, we can make adjustments to timelines and put stuff in it and reroute stuff up here, but it's coming down. And timelines are collapsing into the probabilities, probability streams are merging. So and that is happening on Legion as well, where timelines were collapsing. And so suddenly time becomes very unstable and you can't go back the way. For a while, we could go back. Remember I said there is time travel, because there is. Time works in 2 directions. You can experience the effects of something before the event. And I'm actually going to talk about the way that works too, because I have a diagram for that. And that's also the way prophecy works too. You can, you can very easily sense see that something's approaching lifetimes away. Sometimes if you're very far off the timeline, you can see very clearly something's going to happen in that lifetime. And if you make an adjustment back here in this one, in this location or time, you can prevent this thing or have a different outcome. But certain things are solidifying. And for a while, there was an algebra and you could reroute kind of endlessly. You could just change the algebra. And so we've been very, 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 very busy changing things to get the best possible outcome. And there comes a point where you've basically, there's a main timeline, and there are certain things on it. There are a couple of different trajectories. Because there's certain things that we're not sure exactly how some of like the lower levels are going to respond yet. There's a certain amount of adjusting we can still do, but we can't go back into, because we've made certain corrections. So we're working in the future and the past simultaneously, and we wanted to get a better future there. So we made adjustments to the past, which changed certain things here. So we no longer have this option, like timelines collapsed. So now there are fewer, and there are fewer timelines. Like if there were 5 timelines and each one of them had 20% chance of happening, and then 2 of them join, now you've got 2 main ones and 1 possibility. And then this one cancels out, this one joins this one and becomes the dominant one. And now basically that's kind of like what we're looking at now. You've got a dominant one that's heavy, there's more of a weight in this direction. So that's likely to occur. Can it change to the other one? Yes, depending on the way people respond to whatever happens. But there are certain things, it's just like it's out of our hands. Now we did the best we could. But the past has changed too, a lot of it. And we're not going to go back. And again, it's like in past lifetimes, because we had not yet taken the bulk of humanity through the Ascension window, which is really like the end all of end all. I shouldn't say it that way. It's the end of the 3rd dimension. We're not going to have the 3rd dimensional world at all after we go through on the other side of the 11 gateway. We're not going back at all. I was told to put the bulk of my focus, vast majority of my focus, into the creation of the new. So at this point, that's what I'm doing. But I still have to refer back a little bit to the old construct, and I was told to still refer back to the Joan lifetime, because I want to, specifically because certain things were seeded there, and they want me to talk about the way things were planted that wound up, because of the geometry, it wound up growing and growing and growing until it created its own nightmare. Because the process of getting the earth uplifted and clarified, cleared, purified, so that all of these systems no longer have corruption, that is still in process. The place where we're likely to have a tendency to muck it up if we're not careful, which is why they're telling me this is, make sure you teach this stuff. This is like my, what I'm supposed to be talking about going forward a bit. There's going to be a tendency to recreate the old system because we remember it. We think of it as normal. We were conditioned so very heavily. So there's going to be kind of a strong leaning to go back into old patterns unless we're careful and kind of keep it upright. You know, make sure you don't go south again. I was told that after we go through the 11 gateway, and let's say everybody has purged their old stuff, we all hated the old system, we've all made it through the other side. And we're creating the new, all these new children, all the flood of walk-ins, we're getting all this nice technology. I was told that not a lot of people are going to fall backwards, but some of them will. I was told that. I was shown like a group of people, and there are some people who got there, but they're not committed to regenerating the change and really committed to establishing the new direction, they're still so nostalgic for the way things were that they're going to try to steer it backwards, even though in theory they would be game to go forward, but they really don't want to be creators as much as kind of like riders in public transportation, like somebody else will do it. And usually what they miss is the ease of it, because there was a geometry in the third dimension, that there was the savior dynamic for a really long time. When we think about tradition, we didn't have a lot of work in terms of creating the new, which takes energy, and you have to be conscientious and focused. It's not something for lazy people. I mean, although in a weird way, because it's so joyful and generative, it feels like play. It doesn't feel like work. So you definitely have that to your advantage. But there are some people who really like, I refer to this example a lot too, but you know, the idea of the Joseph Campbell quote that said, take one step toward the gods, they take 10 towards you. That makes an 11. That's the old geometry. And that was the geometry for the Piscean age, which was that, martyr savior figure. It was all triangular, where humanity is down here and very, very condensed, and the gods are doing the bulk of the job. You know, Jesus doesn't need a bigger job. He's got enough on his plate. That's a stupid example, but like it never, I always wondered about that too. I think he had enough work, enough on his plate. Don't go putting more for him to do. You know, at some point, the 50-50 model, which is the 11 gateway, it's very balanced on all sides, where you give to God whatever you do, everything that you can do is yours to do. Everything that you cannot do, that you genuinely can't do, God will take care of. And it's your job to trust fully so that you can allow that to come in. That is your job. Trusting and allowing and keeping your channel open, straight up and down on both sides, equal masculine and feminine in yourself. So you take an equal amount of action toward your own behalf and that of others, and an equal amount of receiving help from others, equal amount of reception, equal amount of rest and drawing to you. But your job is to maintain your own balance and keep yourself in the center of that cross. So it's no longer Jesus in the center of the cross being tortured. That was the old model. It's you, or each one of us, in the center of our own cross, and we take our portion of the weight. We do our portion of the job. That always bothered me when I was little too. Like, why are we saying, Jesus, do this job for me? I remember hearing about, like the 14 stations of the cross, and thinking how much of that wouldn't your intention, or wouldn't your immediate response be to go and help him lift it? And a lot of people just watched. And at this time, we came back to be the saviors of the world, which means everyone has to adopt their own Christ nature and take the savior, take responsibility for stepping into the savior role and not taking public transportation unless you really can't drive. Poor example. I meant the idea of public transportation meaning you're not driving. That doesn't mean that public transportation is bad. Like, I think there should be more of it. And I think public officials should take it, etc. But like I heard somebody say that they had a dream where they had a car and it was their car. They let somebody else drive their car and that person drove it off a cliff. And I was thinking, well, the reason in your dream, the reason for that is because you let somebody else drive your car. So it's basically, it was an example that, you know, she let her husband make the decisions for her and he doesn't know what the path is and he drove it off a cliff. And she said, I'm still not going to drive my own car. I'm going to take public transport, which in this person's life makes a lot of sense because they're not very, they don't really step into a leadership role. Basically, it's kind of like I'll follow public opinion. That's the only reason I bring it up. I'm not saying actually public transportation is bad, but in terms of social justice, in terms of social change, don't be somebody, no offense to Rosa Parks. Don't be someone who takes public transportation. Be the initiative. Be the one who makes the change. I'm glad Rosa Parks sat on the bus. All right. I feel like I left something behind. What was it? Oh, so whatever you put into the group dynamic and everyone is able to partake. Oh, I'm sorry. God, I'm really off on tangents tonight. When I said Patrick Stewart, if Patrick Stewart was in this, a member of the group, you would have his entire knowledge of Shakespeare, his entire knowledge of everything. And then this person wouldn't even have to talk to Patrick Stewart, provided everything was being shared. They could simply open their mind up and say, I really wish I had, it's like the internet, it's like the mental internet. I wish I had a knowledge of Shakespeare, and into your head, you'd just be able to draw it in. You have that skill set. So when everybody is working in cooperation, when everybody is sharing, that's actually the way it works. It's supposed to work that way. The place we got into trouble, I've really got a glare on this thing. The place we got into trouble, nope, there we go. We got into trouble when certain parties pulled in the opposite direction and were not in cooperation. And if you're not in cooperation, it broke the circuit and there was no success. So you're going to wind up getting out of this. So it's kind of like it intermingles all in here. You make the soup, and then at the end of the cycle, which we're going through now, everybody's getting back. This is the way group karma works. Everybody's getting back what they put in. So that's why in like the Bible, when it says the first shall be last, the last shall be first. If we have been the ones who have been generating the goodwill and doing all of the benevolence and acting with care toward others, we've been keeping ourselves in integrity. And we've been doing benevolent work right and left, and we have yet to see, like, where's my payday? Where's my payday? After, we're in a period of time now where everybody is getting back what they put in. So first in the Joan lifetime, everyone put their stuff into the energetic construct, but now it's time to pull back, get back everything that you generated. So when I say, and then you're going to be placed in, I want to say strata, but you're going to be back where you belong. So if you're somebody who didn't learn the lesson, or you didn't take advantage of the assets of the entire group, I know that for myself, I never stopped offering. People cut themselves off, and it's not that I never said, since you're not giving me anything in return, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to close my door, because I know the way the group dynamics are actually supposed to work. That doesn't mean I'm open to, I'll step away from abuse. But when you totally sever something and you don't allow for flow, that's death. Actually, it's funny. There comes a point where it's really hard to talk about this stuff because even death isn't death. Death is birth on the other side, and that's the happiest thing in the world. It really feels like death when, I mean it actually reversed. Like when you separate off and you're born into a physical body and you lose all memory, you go beneath the veil and you have the experience of separation. You step into a body and you believe that you're separate, a separate being, and you forget your connection, you forget your past identities, that's really death. It's much more death-like than dying. When you actually die, it's reunification with everything. You get it's the best experience in the world. I love that. Can't wait to go. At any rate, everyone's getting back what they put in. So if you acted in integrity, if you were generous, if you were benevolent, you're going to go into a group of people that match you. And it's going to feel exactly like family. And the weird thing is that we're still going to have a spectrum, but we're going to have a spectrum of beings that all know how to work cooperatively. And that's why in the fifth dimension, it's, you get rainbow body, you get light body, you get all of this flow. And it really is, we're making heaven on earth. There is going to be a second wave that come in. With luck, there'll be a third wave too. We'll see how they do. But the first ones to go over en masse are us, the ones that had the toughest job, and we never stopped working, never stopped giving, and we're finally going to go up en masse. It's going to be very, very nice. At any rate, so what did I go to? Oh, but it's the same skill set. I was going to say this. So about the group dynamic, the interesting thing is that it's applied differently depending on who you are. So where's my other, is it this one? Wait a minute. Looking at this one. So it's so interesting that I was going to use this one, but I guess I'll use this one. So in the old energetic construct, I'll use this. I'll use this. The person who was, it's so weird because I haven't spoken to this person in a long time, but I'm just going to use it as an example of the way it works. We shared a skill set. In the old construct, the way we were linked was that I was on the other side of my friend and sister Carmen, who I think forgot me. She remembers me. I don't think she likes me though. She was Isabeau of Bavaria at the time that I was Joan of Arc. She was part of the prophecy too, and she was basically. But we work in tandem. And we were also David and Jonathan from the Bible. It says in the Bible, Jonathan and David had each other's backs in battle. And we were also Vashti and Esther, who also had each other's backs in battle. It was about feminine equality. So when she remembers this, there's no argument at all, not really. But we have the same job. It's just two sides of this exact same coin. But the way it works is that we share a skill set where the way I'm able to layer and understand transparent layers of energy that come together to create a form, I'm able to pull in, to do things with energy so that it comes down into a form. And what you don't, and so it's interesting because I view these things as being transparent levels. It's very much this layering. Whoop. It's a layering idea, layers of transparency. The interesting thing about that is that she's the physically based one of us. But basically if I'm up here and she's down there, She's got the physical attributes of, she's living in the physical realm, and this would be where Josh is. And he's required, because otherwise I've got to go to make any kind of, I can't reach this at all without going through this region, because the bandwidth differential, that's why when I said I'm unplugged from 3, I've got no way of reaching it. Literally, I don't. My energy is out of alignment. But in terms of the skill set, what I think is just fascinating is that I know how to layer frequencies to bring it down into a form. I have heard Carmen in the past talk about cooking this way. She used the same terminology, and she's correct. What she said, she's a phenomenal cook. Very natural, very intuitive. She's an intuitive cook. She can just do it. She just pulls stuff in and it comes out, and it's phenomenal. And I remember hearing her say, but I'm a horrible cook. I'm not horrible, but I'm serviceable at best, because I don't particularly care. You have to birth something. You have to create something through what you genuinely love. And I don't care enough about substance or physical existence, just not what I've done. That's not where all my energy is. I need to be grounded that way, but I need help in order to do it, because I'm in a group dynamic. However, I heard her say one time, cooking is all about layering flavors. And when she said it, because I have light language, there was a light that went off, which means, and it has a certain quality to it, which means, remember this, you're going to want to remember this piece of information for later. That's when people talk, or even when they don't talk, sometimes just in passing, on top of seeing people's energy, on top of hearing voices or hearing sometimes what words that people are saying, there's also flashes of light that go off that are, it's kind of like a qualifying language, or there'll be like something will glow, or if there's a sharp, like if there's a sharp thing, it means one thing, and if there's a glow, it means something else. And depending on the quality of light, there will just be movement items, like synchronicities are pointed out to me if I fail to notice it. Sometimes like I'll see somebody doing something and it'll just light up, like momentarily. It doesn't stay lit, but momentarily there'll just be a little thing, which just means to me, remember this, you're going to want this information. Pay attention to what's happening there. Some qualities of light mean, remember this for later. We're going to refer back to it. You're going to want to remember this piece of information. Other things, when they light up, it means pay attention to this now and notice how it relates to these other things. And when I see these things together, that has a meaning. And it's really not that mysterious. You're, when you go through the 11 gateway, you're going to get a lot of your clair-senses back. It's not that difficult to get reacclimated to using them. There's going to be a period of adjustment, but a lot of people are going to, the period of adjustment happens in my experience more on 4, where there's it's a place where you learn to kind of get your bearings, and I forgot the way this worked, and you got to remember that. Like when people first die. When people first die, they go, same thing. They go out of their body and they lurk around in the spirit realm for a while. The lower levels of the spirit realm, like they don't leave the region of their body immediately. They're usually kind of like lurking for a little while. They will stay like with their family members, or semi close to their body if they're and people, when they're like right before they die, they drift in and out for a while. There's usually, they don't go too far usually. I mean, there are exceptions, but usually they kind of linger for at least a few weeks after a death, but that's not a hard and fast rule here. At any rate, but the way the skill sets work is that it's the same skill set that I have, but I apply my knowledge of layering energies to make something, bring it into creation. I was also good with glazes. Like when I was painting, I could do a lot with transparent glazes. But it's very interesting that it's the same skill set, but I applied it to different things that were my specialty. Somebody else can take their that same body of knowledge, which is in here, in the soup, is an ability to work by layering things that are transparent, an intuitive understanding of how that happens, which, depending on who you are, which being you are, if you want to, you can call that ability in. So since she's physically based, I'll call her Red. Since she's physically based, she can take that and she will apply it to cooking. And as a consequence, she's a very intuitive cook who knows how to layer flavors. So that's pretty neat. I just thought I would point that out. And that's also another reason why everything I make goes down and it gravitates toward her. I make a lot of stuff in energy and it winds up going to her because of the frequency, and also because I was in the Joan of Arc construct, which prevented me from receiving anything. Well, that has sucked. I'm very, very keen on changing that. Let's hope it can happen. I'm sure it can somehow. Also, it has to, because it's been the end of the world. Yeah. End of the old world. So where was I going with this? Oh, I was going to talk. Let me go. Hang on a minute. I've got this whole. I've also got a. Oh God, it's 8:16. How'd that happen? I've got to go get my daughter. I'm going to pick her up, I think, around 9. We'll see what happens. Maybe later. Hang on a second. So certain bandwidths require a bridge. Yeah, they just do. So what happened in the construct, so in the third dimensional construct, where it's more about, it was previously about duality, where there were 6 members. Hi, Ian. Do what worlds have colors? Do the worlds have colors? Which worlds? All worlds have colors. Sorry, I just suddenly remembered something about you. You used an orange for deodorant one time, and that just struck me so funny. You smelled great. I just remember it. So in the energetic construct, the reason sometimes it didn't work as well as it could have is because there was still duality. We made alliances. We made alliances with certain beings that we wouldn't normally work with. Yeah, for the purposes of that lifetime. But in 5, the construct idea remains, because that's just the way groups work. Another example would be, where's the other one? Where's the other one? Wait, I got it. This one. Another example would be this idea of the, if this is a magician's balloon, if some are closed and refuse to participate, it kind of screws up the rest of them. It has an automatic effect. It's not really supposed to, when you're in a group dynamic, in the 5th dimension, definitely, Everything is shared or available. It doesn't mean you walk around in a state of transparency where like I know that I can feel Scorpios cringe, right? Like they want their little secrets, they want their privacy. It doesn't mean that you can't have privacy. It's not like, you know, somebody asked me that one time, do ghosts see us in the bathroom? Like, why would they care? Number one, sure. I've actually had ghosts. I actually did open my eyes when I was lying in the tub one time, and there was a Chinese man in the bathroom, and he wasn't looking at me, but he was definitely there. And he lived he was in the apartment for this apartment for about a little over 2 weeks, actually, and he was there counseling me. Not just in the bathroom either, like he was all over the house. But I saw him clear, like he appears like a person. And but the first time I saw him was when I opened my eyes and I was in the tub, and he was looking. He wasn't looking at me, but he was looking off, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And I worked for those of you who have asked, because some people did. Who was it that was asking me about Jill and Remy, the twin flame healers? I actually was tremendously helped by them early on. When the energy came in at first, when I left my body and I went up 12 dimensions, and it was so, the energy was so big and so intense, and I was flooded with so much interdimensional guidance. I think it was Jill who said she'd never seen anybody be that bombarded with, I mean, by a long shot, like by miles. She said, you have more, she says, because your light is so bright, it's like moths to a flame, and you've got all of these, you know, thousands of spirit guides from, but all sorts of like low level guides, and everybody just wanted something. And she really helped me. I think I had like 3 sessions with them before their prices went up. But invaluable. It was really, really helpful. They worked together as a team, Jill and Remy, and they were able to separate the guides by dimensions, so I could just finally reach just the highest level guides and take advice only from them. Because not all spiritual guidance is at the same level. And I had a lot of lower level guides who mobbed me, just mobbed me. And a lot of them were from the 4th dimension. You never want to take spiritual advice from, but I was just swarmed. I was absolutely swarmed. And that's where, like the Chinese man wasn't a low level guide. He was a spiritual counselor for emperors, apparently. And he was there to counsel me about leadership because that was his job. And he spent about 2 weeks with me several years ago. But I had animal guides here. Of course I would, because I worked a lot with animals. But it was mobbed here for about, I don't know, about a year. At any rate, yeah, Jill and Remy really got me sorted. So it's one of those things to bear in mind. I'm actually really glad that happened, because now I know how to counsel people who are going to be good, because we're going to get a lot of people who are suddenly recovering their spiritual sight. Suddenly, you know, these realms are going to open up, and people who didn't believe it before are going, a lot of them, you know, there's going to be a big wave of people who think they're going crazy. And you know, I remember being fearful of that. I was more adept than a lot of people, or at least I remembered what it was, and I had a spiritual background. So at least I was, had a familiarity with it. But I can only imagine what it must be like for someone who firmly is against that, you know, because the veils are going to lift regardless of who you are. And so a lot of people, I'm really glad these experiences happened to me. It wasn't fun at all. I had a terrible time and very little help. I really wish I'd had a lot more help. But that's one of the things that, like, I feel like I'm able to help people. A lot of people are called mentally ill, for one thing. But our abilities are coming back. And it's important to be steered in the right direction and have it be okay, so you don't go into self-hatred, so you don't go into terror, so your family doesn't throw you out or, you know, threaten to lock you up or take your kids because you know something they don't know yet. There are people who, or they're terrified or suddenly view you as, you know, their enemy or whatever. Because it's also really important to be forgiving, because they're going to need some help too. You know, if you're the people that could never relate to you and you felt like a black sheep in the family and they threw you out or didn't want to have anything to do with you, but all of a sudden it turns around and they're like, oh my God, you know, there's all this truth about aliens coming out, and it turns out that, you know, their memories start to come back. And suddenly they recognize that you were actually telling the truth. And I remember what it was like when my blood ran cold, and I was terrified, and suddenly recognized, like, it's a different thing when you have to when you're around your family, and it's one thing, you've got one relationship going, but then you suddenly remember literally that they burned you alive, and you know, all of a sudden you remember, like, wait a minute, you're really the same person, aren't you? And you haven't treated me much better this lifetime. You're still kind of the same shifty character, and now I really don't trust you. I don't think I can ever sleep with you again. Or and you're surrounded, you know, and your children, it's like everything changes. I remember hearing Goode talk about that one time, that there was at some point there was somebody who had asked him if he wanted his memories from certain lifetimes to come back. He was given a choice. Do you want your memories? Do you want to know your Akashic history? Do you want to see that and remember all of that stuff? But it's going to change your relationship with your children. And he had said no. And I didn't have that choice in this lifetime. I suddenly recalled everything all at once, and it was really traumatic. It really was. And I didn't even remember all of it. I just remembered certain things. I remembered everything related to the Joan of Arc lifetime, but also leading up to the lifetime, and also how certain lifetimes that I've had between then and now related to how we have been trying as a group to rebalance it. Because, man, that was as out of balance as it's possible to get. Totally as out of balance as it's possible to get. That whole victim and narcissist who betrays, that whole thing about, like, doing all of the work and being a martyr for something and getting totally screwed, set up a very imbalanced dynamic, which is actually one thing I want to talk about, that everything in that lifetime planted a seed that led to an expansion, which is now out of control. So one of the reasons that I have to go back in this lifetime and try to go back and address certain things that got fucked up, not always intentionally, certain things we did put into place so that they would come to light. Like I had complained about the public vaginal exams, but I know that we did something like that so that it's in time for disclosure. Because if we're moving in this direction, if you start something there with one person, it's going to get really glaring by this time now. And it's going to affect a huge group of people, which is why now you have pedophilia and investigations on sexual abuse, but you've got full transparency in a public forum, which is the good aspect of that. So was it worth it? Traumatizing, I mean, it was a traumatic experience, and I remember that, and it left me with residual trauma in this lifetime to clean up. Was it worth it to go through that in order to clean up institutionalized corruption? Yeah. So in that regard, I would do that part over. There were certain other things, though, that get, like, I was thinking about, just last time, I had talked about the fact that in that lifetime, when they forced me to sign a document saying that my voices weren't real, and they had tortured me for a long time, held me captive for a long time, and they lied to me and told me that I could go back home to my mother if all I had to do was sign this thing that said, sign this document that said that I had lied and the voices weren't real, but I knew they were real. And I did believe it. I didn't lose my faith, but it occurred to me after I was talking about this last time on my last live stream, I was thinking, well, I endorsed legal trickery, legal loopholes. I was thinking about that, didn't I? Because I had signed my name, which is the only word I knew how to write. I signed my name and I put a little secret sign to myself and between me and God that meant, I don't really mean this. I put a little sign that said, cancel this. I'm not sincere about this. I don't really mean it. I'm signing it, but I don't mean it. So my karma in this lifetime, because everything comes back to you. And granted, like I've got to forgive myself too, because, 19-year-old peasant under extreme duress, and they tortured me and, bent my fingers back to get me to sign it. But it doesn't matter. Did it plant a seed that allowed my energetic signature, which was incredibly strong at the time? I endorsed something that said legal trickery is okay. You can be insincere when you sign a legal document. One of the things we do when we apply our energetic signature to anything, all of the energy comes through us, carries our vibrational signature. Basically, that's why in the fifth dimension, you might have a voting system. It's going to be cleaned up if it still exists, but you don't have to use it because you already voted. You voted with every single thing that comes through you. Every action carries your energetic signature. So when you apply yourself to anything, it carries your integrity or lack thereof. So there's no avoiding karma. So whatever cycle you stay in, or whatever you allow, this is why your integrity is so incredibly important, because there's no escaping it at all. I mean, not at all. If you figure out, and sometimes we don't realize that we're doing something shifty. We think that we can get away with something because in the third dimension, you're living in a place where there is concealment. It's possible to do that there. And in that realm, to a degree, it's appropriate because not everybody is trustworthy either. But in the fifth dimension, it doesn't mean you have to go around and tell everybody everything, but you have to be able to withstand integrity, withstand transparency from an integrity level. So whatever you endorse and say, this is okay with me, you're going to get that right back, and karma comes back real fast to you in 5. Right now, because I'm like, right now, I've got near instant karma. It's faster even in the fifth dimension. If I were just an individual, I have instant karma immediately, instant manifestation immediately. I made this contract where I have been in a group dynamic where I made an agreement on a soul level to carry a group. Like, I'm not leaving until we all leave. We made this thing that you're either going to fix it or you're going to fix it. You're going to stay here until you fix it. And that was to ensure that we got as many up as possible. So I went into this agreement, and so far it hasn't worked out well for me. So I'm fully expecting some divine intervention that is cutting me out of the loop so that other people are forced to pick up the slack. I think that's what's happening. I'm not entirely sure, though. I've been actually out of the loop so that because of that, I actually don't even know what's going on. There's been a lot of interference. And a lot of mixed messages where even if I meditate, I can't always find the exact thing. I don't know. At any rate, other people are being forced to step up or forced to go there's like I'm aware that there's some kind of a tower moment for other people who were supposed to be way further along than they are. In terms of movement, like get it moving. You've had a long time to think about it. No more thinking. You got to get on the ball. But that's not up to me. Just because I know about it doesn't mean I'm not. Yeah. It's a group dynamic. And only some of this is in my control. The other entire half, I can only do what I can do. So my job is information distribution. So that's what I'm doing. And at some point, the money's going to come back to me. At any rate, hang on, just a second. I'm having a hard time reading my writing. Hang on. So one of the things we're having, I've got this huge stack of notes right now. Hi, Andrew. One of the things one of the sticking places that we're having, because I'm dealing with groups. I'm changing subject completely right now. In dealing with groups, because as you know, my whole job has to do with mass migration, getting entire groups, disparate groups, to move up en masse, orchestrate that. One of the problems that we're having with backlash is that we're trying to balance the masculine and the feminine. One of the reasons the masculine, I don't mean the men per se, because there are some divine masculine in male bodies who are doing a pretty good job. And it's so funny because when you find one, man, they're a gem. They're a gem when you finally find one. But they're like as a group in general, we've been having a somewhat of a difficult time balancing the men and the women. If you're talking about physical forms, the women are rising to their power faster than the men are yielding and giving, relinquishing. So if you go back to, and what we need is balance. So if we're here and there has been a discrepancy where the men had more power than the women did. The men had 3 and the women had 1. It needs to go in the direction of the women. That's why the women are also leading. We go first because also we have less there's been less to shift. Is that true? You're talking about substance. The women are pulling, have been, as a group, have been doing a lot more of the movement, and the men have been largely not giving as much, not yielding as much. Anyway, I'm sure you probably have noticed that. It's the side that doesn't want to give. There's like a kind of like the dominant masculine structures in society too are the ones that don't want to lose the power that they have. They like their advantage, and they value, as a rule, this is a gross generalization, but as a rule, they like their advantages. They've grown accustomed to their privileges, and they don't want to give it up. If you want to know where the sticking point is on mass, it's that. They're also, this is so interesting, I find it so funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. She was, in some ways, the women have had a certain kind of advantage. So do the poor. I've said this for a while. But there are certain ways that when you go without something for a really long time, it actually makes you so much stronger. You get resilient, you get resourceful, you get determined, you build certain attributes about yourself that if you've been given every single privilege your entire life and everything has been handed to you, you get, sometimes there's a tendency to really become a bloated tick and very lazy. The people who are most trapped right now in society, if we're talking about groups, again, it's a generalization, are the ones that think that they liked the traditional ways because they benefited by them. They were usually the beneficiaries of a lot of privilege. They're, at this point, they're the ones that are not budging. They're the stuckest. Is it the Ascension window going to wait for them? No, it's not. So it would behoove them. They don't listen to me, and or maybe they, who knows, maybe they will. It won't matter anyway, because tower moments come, and whether they like it or not. But it's interesting because somebody said to me the other day, she was talking, listen to some of the outrage when they don't care about equality, or a lot of people say they care about equality, but if it comes to them having to be the ones who are the givers enough to actually make it equal, they don't want to lose enough, or they want to give like a little tic-tac, but here, I'll give you this much to feed my own sense of superiority and give you enough to keep you alive. You're welcome. But we're going to have equality when there's actual equality. So what you really need to do is make it actually equal and see how much it upsets you. Like what I usually do is exchange my position with somebody else in my mind and see where the adjustment needs to be made, and then actually be committed to making it. And then actually doing it. The other day somebody had been talking to someone else who was very, very upset that she had been taken advantage of. And this person that I know to be a light warrior, she had said to this other person, she finally got it. Like, she couldn't really I understand it for a while. Like, why is this person so upset when it was like nothing? It's like those of us who have lived lives where people have like just constantly taken advantage of us over and over, and after a while you become so used to it, like, what's another punch in the face? It's not going to stop me. I'm going to tell you to stop every single time you do it, but I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to let it tank me just because it happened yet another time. It also doesn't, there's just a way of reacting. This person was outraged that someone had slighted them in something. And my friend, who's a spiritual warrior, had said, who couldn't even understand what's the problem. Like sometimes, like it's this person's first experience with any kind of adversity. I guess that's it. Like there are some people who, my ex-husband one time was embarrassed. I remember, mortified at the idea. It was totally embarrassed that I went and paid for something with change. Like we didn't have any money at the time, and I had emptied out my piggy bank and I went and I purchased something with change. And he was mortified, wouldn't come into the store. He was so embarrassed. And I remember thinking, like, it didn't faze me at all. Like I still got money to pay for it. Who hasn't lived like that for months at a time? And then I realized, well, he hasn't. He's never lived like that. To me, I can sail through that kind of a challenge because it doesn't feel like a challenge to me. I don't like it. I wish I had a bill. I wish I had a credit card, but I don't. I'm still going to get it done. Whereas somebody else will cringe at the very idea of something that those of us who have lived in adversity most of our lives, we no longer have a problem with that because it's so common. I'm the one who's going to get through this challenge, and he's not. This person that I spoke to the other day, she said to the person who was just outraged that she'd been taken advantage of. And my friend said, "Oh, this is the first time that's ever happened to you." And just like it finally got it, like she's never had anybody take advantage of her before. And also it's like, oh my God, that been happening to me daily from the time I was, 4. Doesn't mean we like it, doesn't mean anyone deserves it, doesn't make the situation right, but it's also not going to tank some of us who know how to handle that by now. It's a non-issue. So where was I going with this? First time betrayal. Oh, you pansy. I don't like it either. What we take from that is that you don't do it to someone else. Make sure it strengthens your own integrity. Don't let it take you down. Because, so here's the thing. So what this person, the reactive one, the poor are more generous. I know. It's true. It's really true. We also know what it's like when you actually need something and you don't get it. And we're living in a totally different system where we serve automatically. And it's one of those things, like it doesn't mix with the lower system, the people who hoard and they think they're better off. But honestly, this is the time of transition where the ones who know how to share appropriately, the ones who do know how to solve problems, who are willing to go into discomfort, who are to go from a place of lack because the new is going to come in. Once the sharers are in systems with other givers, we just need to put all the givers together and it solves almost all of the problems. Have you noticed this? It does. Solves everything. The ones who think it's every man for himself and they're really competitive and they think they're going to win this way, it is possible, also completely, not only possible, it's virtually guaranteed. You can win every single battle in the third dimension and lose the war as a consequence because you turn into this big bloated superpower who thinks you're going to win because it was never about competition. If you stayed in a mindset that said, I'm the biggest and the strongest and I took everything from everybody, now I got all this stuff and I win, well, you just lost the war. You missed the entire lesson. That's the only reason you were here. You're not going to get through the 11 gateway. Granted, are there some exceptions in the long term if you have lived a whole bunch of, lifetimes and maybe you need the experience of having a whole bunch, maybe could that serve? Sure. But now in the process of, in where we are with the Earth's development, global evolution, We can't have the time for that lesson's over. If you're a soul who still needs it, you're out. You're going to a lesson planet. You're going to a lesson planet where if you still need that lesson, that's where you're going. It's not a punishment, but it was a measurement. If you still need time to stay in kindergarten and you still miss the window of learning, that's where you're going. Until you learn better. Wasn't that we didn't try to tell you. Let's see. So back to this for a second. Sorry, this is really bouncing around. So back to my my idea of manifestation. The first manifestation after a changed reaction will be at least one more manifestation of your previous reaction, of the previous pattern. Because it's when you change your reaction, it starts up here. You're going to have to wait until it comes down into form, and then you meet it again before you actually have it in hand. So just allow for that. So that's why it's going to be a test of faith. The first manifestation, when something hits you again, and it's your previous pattern, think of it as a test. It's a test of your faith. Basically, it's like the universe saying, are you sure? You just ordered something different from your usual order. Are you sure you want the new one? And you need to say, yes, I want the new one. And react to the old thing appropriately. As soon as you act with non-resistance but a deliberate change to whatever the old thing is, like if you're still battling it, if you're still very reactive to it, saying, fuck you, I hate you, then you're still in conflict, you're still engaging with it. Then you still it still belongs in your field until it's a non-thing. It's kind of like you meet adversity, a certain lesson in adversity until it becomes so smooth and you just doesn't bother you anymore. And then you respond appropriately, where you don't take any shit, but you also you're not triggered. You're not going to get really explosive just because somebody took advantage of you. You're going to call them out on their crap, and then you're going to say, I'm not dealing with you anymore, but you're going to keep it smooth. You're also going to allow for change. You have to allow for change. Like the idea of painting somebody as like, you're a betrayer and you're impossible to change. You don't want to count on them to change. Don't have the external expectation, but also allow for the possibility, infinite possibility, that miracles happen all the time. Your faith in a miracle, your belief, the energy you put into the higher system, the knowledge, the certainty of the higher structure, you have to have that be much stronger than the attention you pay to the old physical form that was a bunch of crap for you. You have to really believe that the new, not only is the new coming in, but it's not out there. It's a guaranteed thing because I'm bringing it down to me. And there comes a point where no matter how much Trump upsets you, don't engage with it. Stop looking at it. Don't give it any of your attention. Stop looking at the problem. Stop looking at the cancer. Stop looking at whatever the issue is that bothers you so much. Take your mind off of it. Although here's the thing, it's like you see the problem for what it is, because if you just ignore the problem, some things don't get solved, they become systemic. And I'm not saying ignore a problem if you know it's there. Like was pedophilia in the church? Absolutely. In order to rid the church of, or anything else, of that, we have to take a really comprehensive look at the energetic structures, how it formed, how it was made. Go back and, but that's what, there are specialists for that task. I'm one of them, where we've gone back into time and we've tweaked certain things and we added certain things in Joan of Arc lifetime. And then we took other parts out and put it in other lifetimes like this one, so that I can deal with certain things now to reduce the severity. Time is just not linear. We have the experience of linear time to the degree that we're stuck in a linear frame of mind. But when you go off the timeline, especially when you go off the timeline sufficiently, you can see all things and they're all concurrent. Where's my other, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I just made it. Wait a minute. Is it here? Oh, here it is. I'm not done with this one yet. Hard thing to discuss. Let's say, it's funny, it looks like a fire. I didn't even think of that. So time is really a spiral. And let's say something happens on this lifetime. Let's call it the Joan of Arc lifetime, because I'll just use my own example. And it's awful. There's a horrible, horrible event. Big, really energetic, energy intense lifetime right there. Because it solidifies and it has so much power, so much influence on that lifetime, when time comes back around again, I realize it's a little screwy because there are different widths. When time comes around again, it has to go, there's going to be a distortion here. It's kind of like in this lifetime, after my memories came back, one of the things when I had the memories, but I was experiencing almost like an echo. This lifetime has been very largely an echo version of that one. My guides had said at the time, in this lifetime, I was going to experience, I was like an obstacle course that was covered with like a blanket, where I couldn't see exactly, I knew something was approaching, like there would be a lump there or a pit or something, and I wasn't sure what it was, but my guides had said, you're gonna meet all of these echoes, basically. It's like, if I'm up here now, I'm still dealing with the effects of whatever this one, if this is the Joan lifetime and this one's this lifetime, let's say, I can smooth it out if I react differently. And for the most part, I've tried to. If I react differently, then it's going to start evening out. And by the time I get to the next lifetime, it'll be smoother and I won't have to meet this problem again. Neither will, there's group karma too. So neither will any of the people that were in that group. But if we have not learned anything as a group, or even as individuals, if we have the same reaction, let's say it's an explosive, horribly unjust situation that is not corrected, and we respond to it differently. Well, this time it's even more, it's a greater distortion. So there's an even bigger distortion in time. So the next time we hit it, we're going to meet it at the top of this peak, and it's going to be even harder to accommodate it. So that's why, like, reactions are easiest, the same way energy, before it gets to you in a solid form, it's easiest to make an adjustment when it's easiest to change. Things are much more flexible initially. It's like, try to keep things in balance and don't be a dick when things come to you. When it's your turn in a construct like this and you're in a group, if there is an injustice and you meet it and it's on your doorstep and you see something, it comes into your field, don't say, it's somebody else's problem to deal with, or it's not my issue. Anything that comes to you is yours to correct. I guarantee you. Number one, there's no way in hell, if you let something pass, if there's an injustice and you allow it to come into, if you meet it and you respond in a way that does not address any imbalance or any injustice, what you're doing with your own energetic signature is saying, my energy says that's okay. I'm paying attention to this, and I'm agreeing with I'm putting my endorsement on it that this is okay. This amount of inequality is okay with me. So what that means is that when it's going to go around, and the next person in line is going to meet the same injustice that was never corrected. So it's going to be like down to here. And if that person fails to make an adjustment, it's going to go to the next person, and they're going to have it's going to be even more unjust for that person because it wasn't corrected at first. And that person's going to receive an even stronger illustration of an injustice or some inequality. Anytime you see in something that's unequal or something that isn't out of balance or unjust, you must take a step to correct it as though it were your own circumstance, because it is. And it's going to come back around. And by the time it hits you, you're going to really wish, if you make the correct connection and understand why this happened, by the time it hits you, it's going to be something this is karma. You're going to get back the same thing that you sent around is going to come back around to you. And if it's not addressed as a group systemically, when it's more or less a gentle imbalance, it's going to come back as something like a French Revolution or an American Revolution or something, when the shit just hits the fan because the imbalance is so extreme that heads roll, and the population who has been working and been diligently serving has nothing left. And then you've got billionaires or whoever, any imbalance where the problem just grows to a place where you've got this one behemoth blimp. It wasn't corrected at the time. So that takes us back to the Joan of Arc lifetime. If one person is allowed to, good intentions, and was it needed at that time? Yes, it was. We could have avoided the imbalance if you see somebody who has done no harm to other people, and an institution says, I think I'm going to harm this person. Just for fun, we're going to make an example out of her, public example, and we're going to burn her alive for causing an uproar. And nobody in the crowd said no. That was its own imbalance. So if you look at the way things escalate, and we're now on the opposite side of the group dynamic in terms of groups through time, because there's group karma too. So whatever started here at the Joan of Arc lifetime has now built up imbalances where, you've got the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and all of these imbalances and certainly we're not the only countries this happens in. It's all over the place. It's global. Massive discrepancies in wealth and power. Massive discrepancies in power. So I'm looking at what started it. Was it just, me and the Joan of Arc lifetime? Of course not. But was that extremely potent an energy that did glow global? Yeah. So in some ways it helped, but it moved everything in two directions, as I've said. It was very, very polarizing. So in some ways you've got, but that's one of those things, like you make agreements. You're like, well, we had to solve it in stages. You've got to free the place in stages or liberate the planet in rounds. You can do it in layers, but you're not going to be able to get them all out. Why? Because there's a bandwidth differential. You're not going to be able to take something down here and get it all the way up here yet. The people need a certain amount of experience. And then there's the whole bandwidth. But they do need to take their power back, absolutely. But the one, when you look at like corporate structure or the way certain institutions, when you give your power away to anything, an individual who's a savior figure, or thinking something else is bigger than I am and I can make no difference, you're keeping yourself powerless like a grain of rice. That's, if you think of yourself as being powerless, that's how powerless you are. Granted, there are some people who energetically and in terms of their spiritual development were not able to do that, nor should they if they're not spiritually developed. However, the dynamics of these, the dynamics from the Joan of Arc lifetime set up, seeded certain geometries for the group, for a group, that established for the group dynamic the structure that now allows for these behemoth corporations or things that, you know, you've got Amazon who has all this power, and, you know, everybody goes through Amazon. If you look at where that started, that dynamic begins with something like a savior figure, and everyone says, oh, well, we're all going to do it. It's so much easier to just let this person do it. Let this entity do it. Sometimes it's appropriate, but again, you have to have balance. There are certain things like government institutions that are, everybody kind of wants to believe in because we would like a structure to function within as a group. But it has to actually be functional. If you fail to, if you fail to address imbalance, it's going to get worse and worse and worse until you hit one of these extremes. Both of them will be hit at the same time, and then it's going to collapse in. It's going to do that every single time until you learn about balance. So that's what the group, the energetic construct is for. What time is it? 9:06. I should probably go get her. She's at a friend's house today. Oh, God, I was going to say that. That's important. I'm going to see. Oh, man, I really want to talk about this, too. Damn. How could it be 9 o'clock already? Yeah, no, that I talked about. I think I'm definitely, yes. Definitely want to talk about this before I go get my daughter. What to do with half creations? That really is something to think about when we, particularly because the timelines have been, it's weird. Remember the other day, my other live stream, I was talking about when I was little, when I would draw things, and if I had to erase something, and I still do this, if I have to erase something, I would draw a little secret sign for myself, a little circle, and then I would erase both of them. And the little secret sign means I don't really mean this. I'm drawing a circle so that the energy, it's a way of locking in the intention that the creative energy that I put into this, I'm recalling it in order to apply it to the new thing. I'm not leaving something unattended. So that's one really important thing to know about anything that you create. Anything that you're birthing, you take full responsibility for anything that you make. So the idea of, in the fifth dimension, a lot of the really, really hot topics, hot bones of contention, like abortion, in the third dimension, how it's like, how are you ever going to solve that argument? Because nobody really knows for sure, and we're just going to keep fighting until we just keep fighting. We're just keep fighting. So in the fifth dimension, that's a non-issue. You can actually safely go to you can hold a very strong opinion about it, but you can safely just release that as an issue at all, because in the fifth dimension, it is just a non-issue. What you do is you allow everyone to make the choice that you want, a choice for themselves, but then there's fully into form. So it allows for you to change your mind and reroute things, but you don't leave energy hanging. it's very counterproductive, and it makes for an illness and a malaise that you can't actually progress to the next level until you clean up all the loose edges. Edges is wrong word. Loose ends. You don't leave an artery bleeding. You cap it off. You resolve it. You do something. You take your take healing energy. This is also one of the things that we all need to do as we're going through our purging and healing spiritual maturity process. Go back and attend to all of the things that you felt were unresolved or didn't end well. Resolve it well, resolve it from a peaceful place, and be responsible for attending to loose gushing arteries of, you know, I skipped out, or what if you started a project and then you kind of left your energy, your energetic force running in a certain direction, but then you wandered off and forgot about it. Take your intention and somehow resolve that with your energy. When you, there are sacred contracts too. Not all of them can be gotten out of, but in terms of like pregnancies and things, we make soul contracts before we come in, before we incarnate. And often through the course of someone's life, like I know that I was contracted for 3 children. And I remember I had 1 miscarriage. My first pregnancy was a miscarriage. And I remember having a dream where a girl came down, and I thought she came down an escalator, and I thought she was coming to me. And I called her honey, and I was really glad to see her. And then she didn't look at me, and she walked past me. And I remember that when I was at that time being like, wait a minute, where'd she go? And then realizing like that was the daughter who had decided not to come in, because at the time I didn't want to be pregnant. I was worried. I was like, oh my God, I hope I'm not pregnant. And then it turns out I was, but I had a miscarriage. In the 5th dimension, abortions are going to be a non-issue, because there's the issue of consent. Number 1, you don't have issues like pregnancy from rape, because there's no rape. There's consent is sacred. Consent is sacred. But you also get permission. Here's the thing. You also get permission and a lot of freedom, so that you're not, you don't have to, for example, farm animals for food. I'm going to go back to this topic. You could just ask them, does someone agree to be if there's even meat eating? Some people might still need to eat meat, but you could still, I don't think so, but you could still do that if you asked for a volunteer, because there is, we think bodies are basically, you know, it's like taking off clothes. You just get another one. Everything regenerates anyway. But like in the whole circle of life, you'd be surprised, especially if you're accustomed to a 3rd dimensional, you know, like traditionally conditioned mindset that everybody wants to live, and why would anybody die? Well, I would die. If somebody said, can I have your body so you can leave and go do something? I'd be like, sure, you want it, you take it. I'm out, man. There are lots of us who would very, very happily do that all the time. A lot of food species do that. But it's important to ask for permission. It's important to give every being the choice. This is why saying thank you to plants is important, and and tell them in advance. Everything communicates. Tell them in advance. Say, I require food. So please pull your energy and your consciousness out of this, because I plan to harvest the carrots today. I thank you for your service. Please take your feelers, you know, take your consciousness out of this right now, because I'm going to pull up the carrots now. Just tell them in advance. I do this a lot of time with like ants or flies or something that are typically thought of to be like nuisance. A lot of people will just swat them. I will sometimes swat them, but I will give them advance notice and open a door. And I'll say, look, I fly over soul. I'm about to swat, and I require this space to be free of flies. You can be over there or you can go out the door. But I'm going to swat in 10 minutes, or I'm going to give you 60 seconds to leave. If I see you again, I'm going to hit you. But I give them the out. It's part of being a co-creator with all of everything else, is that you can make it's not like you can never kill anything. You just tell them and you give them the choice. Do you want to live or die? A lot of them don't care. And that's not even that surprising, considering they know the way it works, and very often humans don't. So what to do with half creations? Pull your energy back, cap it off properly, and then say, instead of this, I'm going to go do this other thing with it. Take that creative energy, though. Be responsible for it and say, I'm going to put it in this way instead. You can still very often have, particularly if something has reached a dead end, like, perfect example, this energetic construct in which I wasn't getting any cooperation. They weren't cooperating the way they were supposed to. It was time to reverse it back to equality. They haven't done it. So I called for divine intervention, and I wanted, because I'm tired of being broke. I actually really want some progress. I want to build something tangible. I was promised I was going to get my school. It went backwards. Instead, it took me from the Joan of Arc lifetime, in this lifetime, it took me my whole life, that 45 years, to get the ratio back to a place where I could get a divorce. And then in the following 6 years, it went backwards instead of forwards. We'd finally reached where it was like time to go for the whole balance and set the new structure, which would have established the new template, which would have fed everybody. And instead it was yanked backwards, and I can't work against it completely. All I can do is handle my own portion of it, which fortunately is sound. Like, I know that I've done everything I could possibly do. So it went backwards, but as a consequence, I called for divine intervention, and they're taking me, the savior figure. I'm going first. The savior figure in this model. And I was supposed to have a working partner. I was supposed to have a working romantic partner too. So that was the twin flame gate. So I don't know who they're going to send me. If they send me somebody different, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I do know that I'm going to do this thing now. The new template, I'm establishing the new one. So we'll see how that goes. So half creations. If something didn't get off the ground, pull your energy back from it with consciousness. Say, I'm ending this. There doesn't have to be backlash or something that's loose-ended, and there doesn't have to be any antagonism. You can leave things very friendly and very open. It doesn't even mean you have to close the door. You can, for example, if I wanted to have another baby, just because I lost the one, I could pull my energy out of that, and I'll just say, come back as my next baby. Sometimes it has the meaning that you give it. You can be in charge of that. But there is an important thing, that you don't abandon your children. So when you go to create something, be it a drawing and you create something particularly from a high vibrational space where you love it, you're birthing it out of love. You love something, you put your creative energy into it. Don't just walk off and leave it unattended. And don't abandon your children. That's a really important thing. You leave things solid and unresolved. Don't leave a mess for the next generation. That goes back to the whole thing about balance. If you're going to rotate to a different place, or if you're getting somebody else's somebody else's issue, if you're vacating your space to go someplace else, make sure that you left it balanced and solid for the next person, because otherwise you've left imbalance, and then that's going to come back to you and it's going to collapse you from wherever you are. It's really important to resolve your issues and don't leave crap for somebody else to deal with. Don't abandon your children. So abortion is going to be solved, the whole issue is going to be solved energetically, because in the fifth dimension, there's balance between the sexes, so we're not going to have things like rape and unwanted children. We might get surprise children, but they would be welcomed. You allow for abortion, but nobody has one. Every baby is wanted, and there is such a wealth of care and eagerness to welcome, eagerness to gather. Just the riches is just plenty. And if you don't want a baby, you could just simply send it away energetically. And you're not going to get something that you don't want. It would be redirected someplace else. Let's see. The idea of, I'm going to end this live stream fairly soon because I have to go get Calico, but the idea of tradition, you can have certain aspects of tradition, but you can't, many things about tradition you can't have anymore, especially the kind of tradition that locked you into a structure of death. Like if you keep old patterns for the sake of it, you're taking your directions for forward motion based on things that came before you, but that doesn't allow for sufficient change. It's one reason the legal system is so incredibly unbalanced and fucked, apart from the fact that legal trickery is there, and a whole bunch of systemic injustice overall, so many reasons. But one of the things that's wrong with it is that everything is based on precedent. Everything is you have to have a precedent for, the law has to exist before you can apply it. But that's like driving while looking out the rear view window. You have to be able to go into new terrain. It's going to require a completely different legal system. Fortunately, one of the things it does is, since everyone in 5 is energetically savvy and energetically transparent, your energetic signature precedes you and it announces your identity, and all of your information can be seen, easily identified, your qualities, all of your qualities. Your history, your Akashic records can be looked into. So if you're an evil bastard, you're not coming. If you're taking advantage of other people, it's any kind of low vibe something, anything, you're going to fall out. It's not even like you're going to need a judge to say, this is what we're doing with you. You're not going to need that. Because vibration, just based on your low vibration alone, you're going to fall into a lower dimension, and you're not even going to be our problem. So that's that. The whole idea of celebrity and twin flames. God, I wanted to talk about that. I admit I mocked somebody. And I was not alone. I mocked, a lot of people. And now I recognize I was completely wrong and she was right. And there was something going on that I had no idea. This happened when I was in college. There was a girl in college. I didn't know anything about twin flames at all. But she said that, and she was a psychic. She was psychic in college. And psychic medium, and she said that she was, I didn't know what twin flames were, but she said she was twin flames with Jim Morrison, and she was very vocal about it. And not only did I think she was full of shit, I thought it was intellectually tacky, and I made all kinds of judgments about her, and like I was snarky. I remember sitting with a group of people and like shaking our heads and like basically just kind of dissing her. she was a friend of mine, but I remember a time in college where I was engaging in just kind of just shabby. It was just shabby behavior. Now when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, I could totally see that. She's probably right. There's actually the idea of, because there is something that I know about now, and she was probably just really a forerunner. And now I can totally see this. She also died prematurely. She's one of those people. She had she died really young, died in her sleep. But I remember hearing about that. And now from this perspective, I can look back, I'm like, God, that was Jim Morrison's twin flame. I think she's probably telling the truth. Do I think she's the only one? No. But there are certain, the whole twin flame idea shifts depending on what strata you're at. In the third dimension, it's, you remember, I don't think I need to repeat it, but the third dimensional idea of a twin flame is true for that dimension. When you leave that dimension, it changes somewhat. As you go up in strata, you could still have the same twin flame. And those of us who go, like I have a twin flame in 12. And I know that 2 of us incarnated on Earth in the third dimension to do a particular job. He's on 12 with me in the Council of Balance while it existed. Now the Council of Balance is defunct, but the 2 of us are still incarnate in, we're still in bodies on Earth. And we're still on the same task too. Like we still have the same mission. And I see him in dreams and he's working. I don't talk to him in dreams. He's working and I'm working too. Every time I see him in a dream, we're both on task, but we're not speaking. But I see what he's doing. Every once in a while we make eye contact, but I'm doing something and he's doing something and it's always the same job because we have a twin flame mission. I'll take you out in a minute. That's Tosh. Where was I going? Oh, I do know several people, and also Joan of Arc. When I was Joan of Arc, I was a twin flame then. There is actually a dynamic by which, if you go back to, it's not what I was going to use this diagram for, but if you go back to this diagram and you think that one of the earthly triangle, the earthly twin is very physically based, has an energetic, an energetic load, a really heavy energetic load that is very earthly based. It's very dense, very, very dense. In order to balance that, it takes, so if you think of like somebody who's famous, has a 3D, like somebody who's in Hollywood, they're going to have a network, a third dimensional network of a lot, very much like Joan of Arc. When I was Joan of Arc, I was very terrain based. It was about France. There was an identity, and all of my network, the people who followed me, to use as an example, the people who followed me all had, they were having a very third dimensional experience. They were carrying a lot of density. So in order to get that to lift up, in order to lift that degree of density, that's where you had legions of angels or legions of other beings that's equal to that. It's going to be a high vibrational network that comes in on the top end. So if you're talking about a twin flame pair, very often a celebrity or someone here who will have a fan base that's very three-dimensional because they're you're watching Hollywood, they're giving their power to an icon. They're in that strata where that kind of thing happens. In order to balance that, you're going to need a high vibrational equivalent. And then you're gonna meet. And what, in order to help lift this degree of density and that network. So very often, a twin flame kind of person will come down as a celebrity in order to energetically connect to an enormous fan base. And sometimes they're the sleepers too, but they will have a physically oriented network and carry that energetically. And then the other twin will be very, very light and high vibrational, and will be able to connect. When they connect, it's going to, because the energetic circuitry runs two directions, the light side is going to be, the dark side is going to be lifted, the light side is going to be grounded, and you're going to achieve more or less a balance in the middle. So if somebody says that they have a twin who's a famous person, and several people think that they're, you know, they're also Jim Morrison's twin flame, they might not be wrong. And I shouldn't have mocked them when I did it. Granted, it was a long time ago, 30 years. I've learned some shit since then. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to wind up talking about this tomorrow. I think I'm going to go get Calico now. Tomorrow or the next day, I'll probably do another live stream. If any of you can make a donation, that would be really, really good. I'm going to post the link. If you could do that, that would be super, since I have less than $20 to my name and I need groceries. I love you extra, 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 extra. Bye.